For more on the story, let's welcome back Scott Mann, retired Lieutenant Colonel for the U.S. Army Special Forces and the director and founder of the Stability Institute. Scott, we really appreciate your time. Stability may be synonymous with prosperity, but then again not. All this talk about root causes, isn't it a little bit premature when you haven't neutralized the threat yet?
Well, JD, it's a tricky thing. And, you know, the Stability Institute, I actually founded that coming out of a program that we ran in Afghanistan that was all bottom up focused on helping Afghan villagers push back against the Taliban. And that program was so successful towards the end of the war that Mullah Omar was on record as citing it as one of the greatest threats facing the Taliban. So there is something to this notion of understanding how ISIS and other groups exploit grievances, but you don't fix the problem by going in and just addressing the grievances, but you do need to understand how they operate. The first concern I have, JD, is that we're not calling the enemy who he is. These are Islamist violent extremists. And I don't care if you're fighting Nazis or fascists or communists. You have to start by calling the enemy who they are and then closely analyzing how they operate and going after them and not trying to make it politically correct in the process.
So, Scott, you chronicle the true winning of hearts and minds, as you called it, from the bottom up, on the ground, but it was after successful military assaults that neutralized those who intended us harm and those responsible for terror. I'm just curious about the notion of ISIS recruiting. In your opinion, does the president waxing ad nauseum about grievances, in a weird way, does that help ISIS recruiting? In other words, does it legitimize the alleged grievances of the third world and of the Islamic world?
Well, there are several things that we're doing that I believe are actually contributing to ISIS recruiting right now. First of all, very few people at the policy or politician level actually understand what ISIS's true objectives are with the global caliphate and the narrative that they're pushing out into the most remote villages and shanty towns. Their narrative, JD, is that Islam is under attack by the West and it's the duty of every Muslim to defend it. And that narrative resonates because it has a historical tie back to the reemergence of Islam, and it's resonating, and we're not even tracking that. And we're playing into that narrative hook, line, and sinker by doing these intermittent airstrikes and these half-hearted drone strikes. It actually fuels the narrative because there's no presence there locally for us to compete with that narrative in those villages and communities. The only thing they see is a drone strike, and it just plays right into that. And that, you know, look at Copenhagen, Denmark. Those killings by that young man, Hussein, he was a gangster. He was one of the brothers. He was converted in prison and radicalized online. He took his allegiance to ISIS right before he did the shootings, and his brothers collectively held up the index finger of ISIS in a silent wake to him at where he was slain. This thing is spreading, and we're not even tracking the narrative they're using to do it.
So, we've got about 3.5 minutes remaining, and I want to get your solution. What should we be doing to counteract the narrative that has taken root across the reaches of the Middle East and elsewhere?
Call the enemy what he is. He's an Islamist violent extremist. Understand how he operates. He goes into undergoverned, fragile states that are beyond the reach of the government, and he exploits tribal societies from the bottom up. We've got to get into these local areas. Yes, we have to target these guys. Yes, we have to kill them and take them off the battlefield. But we have to go in and find locals who are already resisting and who are willing to resist. There are a lot of them out there. But we've got to take the political risk by getting our Green Berets and other advisors out there, live and work among these people so that we can push ISIS out from the bottom up. The thing ISIS are most afraid of, JD, are being irrelevant. And when locals push them out and don't want them around, they're just thugs. And that's how we beat these guys. Bottom up, one village at a time. It's going to take some time, but we've done it before and we can absolutely do it. We've just got to change how we operate.
Scott, I want to shift gears here and get back to a story we led this program with, and that is the announcement yesterday from the Pentagon revealing the time frame and the location for a major offensive against ISIS. The U.S. laying out a battle plan to retake Mosul and saying about 20,000 to 25,000 Iraqi troops currently being trained are going to do it. Is there any military rationale for telegraphing this punch?
Yeah, I'm always reluctant to comment on that, JD, because I know that the maneuver commanders on the ground over there, those guys have a lot of talent, and there may be some things that they're doing with leading with this story or this strategic communications piece that I'm not seeing here in Tampa. It does beg the question. I mean, certainly from an operational security perspective, it gives me some concerns. But I'm gonna trust those commanders on the ground and know that they're brilliant tacticians and that they know what they're doing.
Well, let me reframe it for you, Scott. Given your real life background in the Green Berets, do you ever recall Pentagon or others whom you followed into battle releasing the date of a specific military strike?
No, none come to mind.
So it's fair to say this is unparalleled.
Yeah, and again, there could be informational reasons for it that they're trying to do that I'd rather not go into here, but it is unusual.
Well, some speculate that it was to put pressure on the Iraqis to make sure they show up to fight. But that's some of the intrigues of government-to-government relationships, and it's worth noting that every alliance has its share of stresses and strains, but I just can't recall any time when it was publicly announced and eagerly reported by the press when lives may be at stake. Scott, Mann, we appreciate the caution you bring to that particular part of the story and also the background on ISIS and what you believe it will take to deal with this genuine threat, this modern caliphate, which now in terms of territory encompasses an area in size roughly about the size of the United Kingdom. Scott, thanks for checking in from Tampa. When we come back, Chris Farrell will be here to talk about Bo Bergdahl and the Taliban 5 after this update.